I realize that what most Canadians want to know is when are we going to lower our policy rate? What do we need to see to be convinced to cut? The short answer is we are seeing what we need to see, but we need to see it for longer to be confident that the progress towards price stability will be sustained. The further decline we've seen in inflation is very recent. We need to be assured it's not just a temporary dip.
Then they cut interest rates, and now the inflation print that we had last week in 1 month has been over half of their 2% target. So the Bank of Canada is going to be absolutely themselves about what is happening right now with inflation. So let's get into this report real quick. So the consumer price index rose 2.6% year over year following an increase of 1.9%. So the government is pinning this rise to the end of the GST and HST holiday, but I'm going to prove to you that that is not the case in a second here. But first of all, what I want to show you is really the punchline of this, which is the month-over-month gain, because it was absolutely massive. And that's where you can blow apart the narrative of it being that tax holiday. Because if you look at the gain that we saw on core, which is what the Bank of Canada really focuses on here, you can see it's at 0.7%. And if you go to the normal CPI, which is still a CPI, but this is the one that includes gasoline and food and those things, it's at 1.1%. And you have to go back to the last time it was this high, which was actually June of 2022. So let's take a look at where inflation was in June 2022. Yeah, that would be the peak of this inflation mountain that we're looking at right here, where it was at 8.1%. Now, the reason why it's not at 8.1% right now is because you see the year-over-year numbers, which are just for the base effects. And also, you have to remember the CPI is changing all the time. And that's why the CPI just isn't accurate at all. I mean, how can you measure something which is constantly changing based on historical patterns? It's just really difficult to do. And then if you look at the core CPI here, which was at 0.7%, the last time was also June 2022 when it was at 0.8% versus this 0.7%. So then if you go to the core inflation rate here, you can see that in June of 2022, it was at 6.2%. Again, the peak of this mountain here. So the Bank of Canada is going to be seriously worried about what's going on there. And then basically, if you look into the breakdown of different components, I mean, again, it just blows apart the narrative that it was the tax holiday, because you've got shelter that is bringing it up, you've got food that was bringing it up, and you've also got transportation, many things which were actually excluded from tax anyway. If you actually look at clothing and footwear, I mean, that didn't increase that much at all. And if you look at household operations, furnishings and equipment, again, it didn't increase by much. All the things that actually have a lot of tax on, they didn't increase by much. So that pretty much shows you what's going on there, which is very interesting. And now I want to show you what's happening with bank lending, because this is really interesting and a lot of people will not have caught this. So for this, we have to go to a Bank of Canada chart here. And what's basically happening is, as you can see, non-financial corporations and unincorporated businesses, lending is actually going down. And if you actually look at loans to other Canadians, again, lending is actually going in the opposite direction to what you need to happen in a debt-based Ponzi scheme like the one going on in Canada right now. You need debt to be growing because guess what? People are paying debt with debt. So they need to expand their credit to pay down more credit. I know it's a Ponzi scheme, it's a pyramid scheme, whatever you want to call it. It has elements of both. And that's exactly what a credit bubble is essentially. And that's why they never last and they always burst. And basically, you're beginning to see that in Q3, Q4 of last year, you saw this actually begin to decline. So this is very indicative of bad times ahead, because it suggests that bank credit is tightening up at a time when businesses and consumers need it more, because they're going to be relying on it, because guess what? They're going to be losing their job. And you might start to see that banks start to take away things like personal lines of credit to people who aren't using them, and things like like that. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be using them in 3 months when they lose their job. Obviously, the unemployment rate is going up and up and up. And what we've seen over the past couple of months with the 5-year government bond, which is at least part of what the fixed rate mortgage is based on in Canada, is it's at the same level it was in early February right now in March. So obviously, even though the Bank of Canada is cutting rates, the bond market is ignoring them. And this brings another point up, which is that the Bank of Canada only controls the interest rate at the very front end of the curve. So at all these other intervals, like the 5-year, even 10-year, 20-year, they are accounting more for future inflation and growth. And what will be really interesting is what happens to these when the government announces their next stimulus program, because they're already talking about it. It's only a matter of time. Obviously, it didn't take them very long with the pandemic, and now they're actually doing it before the crisis as deemed by them, because if you really think about it, it's already a crisis. Many of us know that already. But if you look at what's going on here with the household saving rate, that is increasing as well. That suggests that people are holding money back because they're uncertain about what's happening. But guys, this has been happening since 2023. This isn't the tariffs. It's just many people know what is happening with the economy and they're not blind to it like a lot of the sheep. And another thing that I have to mention here is when you talk about inflation, you have to remember that you're robbing Peter to pay Paul if there hasn't been enough wage growth. And if you look at the wage growth, whilst there has been wage growth in the past year, it's been around 4%, which in real terms would be negative. But because the CPI is the CPI, it's actually positive in real terms, at least if you use that measure. So let's say you do have that real growth in wages. Well, what you have to remember is this is mostly happening because of government wages going up, not because private sector wages are going up. They've been stagnating. In fact, they've been stagnating in Alberta for 10 years. So what that basically means is, yes, as more and more tariffs come in, you can definitely see that prices will rise, but that will definitely be temporary because there's no extra money that is coming to chase the goods and services to drive up the prices, unless, of course, the government does another massive fiscal, which I think is a huge risk and could actually happen because they've already been talking about it. So it's whether they do it before the election or afterwards. They've already got the backing of no backbone Jagmeet now, so it looks like there's not going to be a vote of no confidence anymore, which is going to mean that you could see a stimulus program that is tabled, and we'll have to see what it is as it comes and how that could possibly impact inflation. It depends how direct it is. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd highly recommend that you check out this video here. And then if you're looking for a VPN and also want to protect your privacy and help out the channel, then please go to expressvpn.com/marketmania for the best deal. And I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.